Welcome to the Deer Society Podcast. Here's your host, Brian Lemke.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Deer Society Podcast. I'm Brian Lemke and joined by Mr. Mike Dukehart and big buck killer straight out of Iowa, Mr. Colton Hall. How you doing today, Colton?
Not too bad.
Thanks for joining us. We're here talking about big bucks today. Before we get in, for those of you guys who have watched Deer Society and followed Deer Society and Illusion, Colton has been with the AWS team and a longtime main contributor for the Deer Society. Why don't we just kind of talk about it first, how you guys first started working together, and maybe, Mike, you can chime in and talk about your history with Colton.
Yeah, I mean, it all kind of started back at the beginning when we first created the Extinguisher Deer Call. Actually, JJ's the one who initiated it, if you want to go back to the very beginning, because he ran into Rod White, and Rod White was working with Andy Orr, and Rod and Andy were together, and of course Andy and Colton were good friends and doing work together. So it was a chain event, basically at the beginning of the whole Whitetail portion of Illusion. And so these team members and Colton just, he's just such a killer. Of course, all the great content and everything that he did was just such a huge, asset, and it was just like golden candy.
Okay. Easy, fellas. Easy, fellas.
No. Just take it. Take your medicine here. And anyway, I remember Andy at that time had shot a nice buck, Big Buckets, I think was the name of it. And it was in that 230 range. And so Andy was kind of the king of the castle at the time. And but him and Colton were chasing this other buck that we know as Mr. Maybe. And Andy's like all excited, hey, I'll duke around this monster buck, blah, 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 And I go, hey, good, get him and get him on film, rattle him in or call him in, or, if it works out, let us know. So that really started the whole thing, was Mr. Maybe. And then Colton beat him by like an inch or something.
Absolutely. 1 full inch. And those all count, every one of them. So I'm keeping it.
So that was actually, they brought both the mounts over to our house. That's when the studio was back at the home, and we did some video work with it, and just had a great time. And that's actually when I actually first met Colton for the first time.
Yeah, that's been many, many, many moons ago. A long time ago.
Yeah.
But even before that, though, I started laying out the groundwork for filming. I think the first filming I did I was probably 15 with Rocky Track and Trail, filming for them, running a camera for a guy that I knew. And we went out and chased mule deer out in South Dakota one time, and that was pretty cool, and busted into the competitive turkey calling thing a little bit, so kind of got exposed to the industry a little bit more that way. And when I was probably 18, I was on a show called Average Joe's. We had a show that was on Pursuit Channel for a little while, and Andy was a part of that group, and when that group kind of fell apart, me and Andy stayed together. So that's kind of how I hitched on to Andy and rode the train all the way here.
Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, like I said, for those of you guys who followed Deer Society, you're familiar with Colton and especially Mr. Maybe. And for those of you guys who don't or haven't in the past and are watching the podcast now, we have a picture of Colton up on the screen here with his famous Mr. Maybe deer. And Colton, you look a little different these days from up there on the screen.
Yeah, it's been a long, long time ago. 2012 was that deer, and just here recently I've been kind of on a weight loss fitness kick and trying to gear up more for those Western type trips and be able to push farther and go harder and get to those places I've never been. So that's kind of been my goal.
You're looking good, man.
I appreciate that.
Looking great.
Thank you. It's been a long road, but
yeah,
I'm glad to be here. So.
Well, that's awesome. And like Mike said, you look great. Keep it up. So it seems like a lot of changes in the past year. And I want to talk about your 2019 hunting season. And the main change that you kind of made was kind of going traditional this year. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I don't know. I guess I'm nostalgic, getting into my 30s now and just kind of appreciating things that are old more, you know what I mean? Just as far as tradition goes. And I was the guy that chased the new bows every year, and I was all about speed, and I had to have the newest, greatest thing, And it burnt me several times. I had a lot of bows I was unhappy with, I didn't bond with, I didn't shoot well. and they cost a lot of money. And when they don't work out for you, it's just a big waste. So I kind of just took a step back in time, went back to my roots a little bit, and went back to the fundamentals of archery, and switched to a recurve initially. Shot a doe with that and a turkey, and decided that go with the longbow and give that a try. And man, I fell in love with it. I really, really liked the longbow. So enjoyed that this season, and was lucky enough to put a buck on the ground with it. So I was pretty fortunate.
How long did it take you, once you decided you were going to make that switch and you started shooting a longbow? I mean, what was that like, when you first picked it up, first shot one, kind of from the first time here recently, I guess?
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, I've always kind of messed with them a little bit, just something fun to do. But making the transition from a compound was tough. I mean, it's a big learning curve. You got to go clear back to the fundamentals. You got to understand the mechanics of archery and what an arrow does when it leaves, and your form has to be a lot better. They're just not as forgiving, and you gotta really shoot them. Most compound bows anymore, with all the let off and everything, you just set the pin where you want it and pull the trigger, and it kind of does the work for you. And that's not the case with a stick bow. I mean, you got to earn it. You shoot a lot of arrows. You shoot a lot of bad arrows, definitely, before you ever get your form kind of dialed in. And it takes some time, but it's really, really rewarding when it all comes together, for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how the way you explain that transitioning into the longbow. I'm not going to give away my exact age, but I qualify for senior in a few things now. So, but I made transitions throughout my hunting career. When I started back in high school, and never really came much from a family of hunting. But as I progress, and we built a business. I was hardcore. We were doing waterfowl, and we have a lot in common that way too. Colton's big into the waterfowl and turkey, but I'm changing a little bit, and I can look back at some of those changes when they started. And I remember shooting. I was really hot on the turkeys, and we were killing them like crazy. And one hunt, I ended up saying, all right, I'm going to kill a turkey with a bow. And I went the whole season. I was working this one time. It wasn't working out, and I was like, heck with it. Just bought a brand new shotgun. I'm going to take it out the last day. Well, I ended up calling this turkey within, 3-4 yards of me, sitting out on a fence corner. And he's in full strut, so he couldn't see me when he was strutting around. It was a perfect opportunity with a bow, and I ended up shooting him with a gun. And I'll never forget the disappointment of that hunt. And I've never felt disappointment in a hunt before. But it was that challenge that I was seeking, and I didn't realize that you mature.
Yeah.
And things change, and things, you prioritize different things. And it's more about experience than it really is about the animal anymore. And so I'm kind of seeing,
Well, like you said too, I mean, I think that about everybody goes through phases as a hunter. When you grow up and you're a kid, it's all about, I got to fill tags.
Yep.
I got to fill every tag I have. I got to kill my limit of roosters every day. I got to shoot, every deer I can. And then as you get older, it becomes more about the quality of the experience, and it doesn't become a numbers game. You look for, you target bigger bucks, and then you target older bucks. And then, I don't know, all of a sudden it becomes this thing where it's more about, that deer could be 180 inches and it happens in 10 seconds, and, it's not that exciting. But a deal like I got into this year, the buck is 90 inches or something. And that experience, that hunt, that raw feeling, it was just, that hunt was incredible. Just a totally different feeling than what it used to be back in the day.
Well, one thing about Colton, and the reason he has so many video views, is I don't know if it's by chance or what it is, but you're running into hunting experiences that are just, they just don't happen to the average guy all the time. So I'll go back to, obviously, Mr. Maybe is a major one. Just because of the length of time and the size of the deer and, how much effort you put into it. Well, then you look at the Tunnel of Pain era when you got the Icebreaker.
Yep.
Excuse me. So Icebreaker was a phenomenal experience. A deer coming across a frozen river, slipping around with his feet whipping out and underneath. That was a phenomenal deal. And then this recently, the
Megatron.
Mm-hmm. What a story.
Yeah,
the emotional ups and downs. And then, of course, now we're talking about the longbow one. So, it's the experience when you're talking about that. These are amazing experiences you're having.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been a lot of cool hunts that I remember. A lot of cool things that have happened, but like I said, this deer was kind of pretty special this year, just in the fact that it was my first buck with a longbow, and to do it spot and stock this year was crazy. Something new challenges is what we're always looking for. Something different, something to keep you motivated. And spot and stock was something I'd never done before, and to do it with two guys and a camera, and to make that all happen. I mean, it's pretty special. It doesn't happen all the time.
Yeah. So definitely this year's or 2019's hunt for you with this traditional bow and that buck is one of the craziest hunts that I've ever seen, and I can't imagine being in your shoes during that hunt, and I want to talk to you about that. But before we get into that, I want to talk about a little bit of the hunting that you do in Iowa and how you hunt and what you think has really made you successful. And I don't know that any of those tactics have changed hunting with a longbow, but what are some things maybe generally that you think makes you so successful and have given you the opportunity to harvest some world-class deer over the years?
Oh man, I mean, I'm in a good area. That's obviously 90% of the battle is being in the right area. And if you don't have the deer density, you're obviously not going to have as much success. So I'm in a great area. I got some great farms to hunt. I'm very fortunate to have those. But I mean, realistically, I would say woodsmanship. I mean, I don't know how else to put it, but I feel like that's a quality that's kind of lacking these days that I see anyways is, just going back to my roots and trusting your gut instincts, reading the sign, boots on the ground type, putting yourself in those positions, finding the bottlenecks, finding the right spots, finding where the deer are at. That's my biggest thing, I would say. And I'm not just the guy that's going to go sit on a field edge and, and observe and not make moves. I'm always ready to move and stay mobile and just keep learning. That's the biggest thing. You have to, as a whitetail hunter, as a hunter of any kind, you have to be willing to learn. And I think that if you reject that, then you're setting yourself up to fail. I mean, whether it be whitetails or waterfowl there's always something to learn.
Well, on that point, that's how I built my company. I got some advice from a guy one time when I was just starting out with my waterfowl outfitting business, and he said, Mike, because you're a little young, you're a little cocky, you think you know a lot, and not that I was coming off that way, but he just said, Mike, one of the best things that you could ever do is absorb as much information as you can. And he says, and just throw out what you don't need. And he says, it'll surprise you where some of this information comes that ends up being some of the most valuable. It may be coming from a source or a resource that you would normally consider not even valid. And then all of a sudden something will click and you'll realize, oh, there's something to that. And then it'll turn into something big for you. So taking in that information and learning, that's just the driver. And, pulling that information, that's such a big deal. So I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I absolutely hear what you're hearing about or saying about woodsmanship, and I think there's such a wealth of knowledge out there online and on YouTube. And obviously we try to educate our viewers as much as possible here at the Deer Society, but there's absolutely something to be said about taking that information, then going and applying it. So, you're going out in the woods and actually learning for yourself, seeing those things. I think that's such a huge asset and something that a lot of, especially the younger generation has a hard time connecting the dots there. They'll watch YouTube for 10 hours a day and learn as much as they can, but then going out there and applying it's a different story.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Well, and it changes too, because I'll just look back at, learning the language of a deer, studying animals' language. There were things that we would do back in the day for goose hunting that doesn't even work today.
Right.
And it's the same thing with whitetail. Learning to communicate. How are the deer reacting? Did we learn something new? Of course, it never ends. The animals change, their behavior changes, and all these things. It's a never-ending amount of learning and knowledge. So if you ever think that you finally figured it all out, well, I call BS, because it's going to change.
And it's not only, in my opinion, it's not only the animals changing, but like we talked about earlier, people as hunters are changing all the time too. And so you got to know what the animals are doing, but also as a hunter, like you said, your priorities change, so where I'm at now with the traditional bow, I'm going to have to relearn again because I'm going to have to reset all my stands and set these stands up to function as traditional stands to keep these deer at 20 yards or less. It's going to be a learning curve still, but I think that it'll be a lot of fun, and I think there'll be a lot of good opportunities, a lot of good experiences, and probably fewer harvests, but just overall better quality experiences is what I'm going for.
For sure. Well, so diving into this past fall, I mean, you had some encounters that looked like from the video with some pretty quality deer that, would typically maybe be in range and because you're hunting traditionally just didn't necessarily get the job done. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I still own a compound. I took it out once this year, harvested one doe with it. Like I said, I told everybody, all my friends, they're like, well, you going to just quit compound hunting? No, I'm not. I'll keep my compound for if I want to go out west, and I'll keep it for mass casualties when I need to take down some doe numbers, But yeah, the traditional hunting definitely, it costs you some deer, and you have to be willing to accept that, or you're just going to be frustrated. This year, the video of Kyle's buck, actually, I had an encounter with him, had him at 35 yards, standing in some ironwoods behind us, and with a compound bow, a guy probably could have slipped one in there, and he would have been mine. But that's just the way the cookie crumbles, I guess, and you're just gonna have to let some of them slip through the cracks.
I'm going to make a prediction that these guys with the traditional archery, and there hasn't been a lot of that being documented, on platforms kind of like what Deer Society has. So my prediction is you're going to see some incredible experiences with some fantastic storylines, and there may not be a harvest attached to it, but they're going to go viral.
Yeah,
that's my call.
That's my ultimate goal. That's the end game. I mean, nothing's going to change as far as my hunting strategy. I'm still going to be sitting in a tree stand, blind calling, rattling, doing all those things that I normally do, trying to suck these deer in from long range. That's one of my favorite things to do. That's why I love turkeys and elk and stuff like that. Animals that you can audibly locate and communicate with and try to draw them in. And now with what you guys have done, we're able to do that. That's my favorite thing to do is try to pull them in. So I'm still going to be doing the same tactics, trying to call, and just going to have to call them in a little bit closer and hope that our scent game is on point and we can beat them and see what happens. I guess it's going to be a wild ride, that's for sure, but yeah, well, I'm excited.
I can tell you there's some pretty ridiculous hunts from this past fall that are going to come out on the Deer Society platform here as it gets closer to hunting season, and you're gonna be on the edge of your seat, trust me. So I want to dive into one in particular this year, and that's your first buck with a longbow. Walk me through that. Tell me what went on during this hunt last fall.
Don't give it all away though.
Man. Without giving it all away, so Jacob Miner, good friend of mine, he actually came down and was running the camera for me that morning, and we hunted in the morning, went to a stand, and it was pretty lackluster, not a lot going on, and it was, 9:30, I suppose, and I had to get down to go do cow chores, and as we were on the way away from the farm, we spotted this buck, and he was cutting across the cornfield, and we could tell that something was off about him, just the way he was walking, and things seemed kind of strange. And he ended up going and bedding on a terrace, and long story short, we were able to make a big swing and try to get in position with him, and he offered me a shot, and you've seen it. I mean, it's pretty wild. It gets crazy after we get down there on him, but it was a cool experience for sure.
Well, I'll give a little bit away.
I don't want to give too much away.
I got to give a little bit away because his first, kill, obviously, with the longbow was a little bit similar as my very first harvest of a deer, a little buck. And it was when I was young, first time out gun hunting. And anyway, make a long story short, there was a snowstorm. I got to the spot that I had scouted out. It was state land. Never shot a deer before, sitting there freezing my butt off. And some deer came by, some does. I'm like, oh, well, that's good because that's within range if a buck comes in behind these does, And sure as heck it happened. It was a young deer. And I'm like, oh, I know exactly where he's going to go. And so I was anticipating watching him come from a long ways away with the snow on the ground. And he did exactly what those does did. And I shoot him, put a decent hit on it. And this is where there's a little bit of similarity here. the deer turned and came right at me. And I'm talking a yard away. I thought, I didn't know if I was going to get run over or what was going to happen. And of course, the adrenaline's kicked in, first deer, and I'm just unloading on this thing as it runs by at a yard away, and that's as far as I'm going to go.
Well, yeah, that's a very outside picture of what happens in this hunt with Colton last fall, but it is one of the craziest hunts that I've ever seen. Definitely look forward to watching it. So I guess not to give the ending away, but we've already talked about you do end up getting this buck.
Sure.
Talk to me about what that's like, what the reward was like there in your mind. I mean, you've shot these world-class deer, Mr. Maybe and others. Tell me how that compares to some of those bucks.
Man, I don't even know how to put it into words. Like that buck means as much to me as Mr. Maybe does. I mean, I hunted Mr. Maybe for 4 years. He's a big deer. He's 228, and guys hunt their entire lives for something like that. But yeah, this deer means a whole lot to me. Just the way that it all worked out. Like we're talking about, I don't want to give too much away, but the way that the position the deer was in and the position that I was in to be able to offer a hand, so to speak, and he wasn't a high scoring deer by any means, but my first deer with the longbow and to do it on the ground like that, I mean, cloud nine for sure. That's kind of what sparked it for me originally. Was I was kind of sitting around home there last winter primarily, and I was looking around at my mounts on the wall, and I can tell you where I was when it happened, what I shot it with, and all that. And there were so many of them. I just thought that I was ready for the next thing. You know what I mean? I needed the next chapter of my bow hunting career. So that's what kind of pushed me into it. And your first one's always incredible. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's a forky, a doe, a 180, your first deer is always incredible with whatever it might be. And this one's the same way. I mean, it means the world to me. So
that's awesome. Well, there's that hunt, and then you have a few other hunts that are going to be coming out on the Deer Society platform too, and another special one that I think is probably at the top of your list, and you can speak to it. One with your son.
Oh yeah, that was wild. And he's turned into quite the little hunter now. I mean, he pushes me to go hunting when I don't even want to go anymore. It's like, oh, man, I never thought I'd be in that position, but I kind of created a monster, I guess. But yeah, I got a hunt with Carter that's going to be coming out over at our cattle farm. A gun hunt that was pretty awesome. It was our first buck kill together, me and Carter, and I self-filmed that. And he got to be there for the whole process. He grounded out with me the whole season, just in and out, and it was cold, and he fought through the weather, and, we ate hundreds of dollars worth of snacks and tried to keep it fun for him or whatever. But I wanted him to see the payoff. I wanted him to see the reward side of it. He worked so hard to go with me, and just one of them deals, I guess. I just get lucky in these situations where I want something so bad, it seems like, and it just shows up. And that buck just showed up out of the blue, and we beat him downwind. That was the biggest thing. He came directly downwind, and I was able to explain all that to Carter and how that worked, and why we do the phase, why we shower, why we keep our clothes separate, why we spray down, why we do all those things. And then for him to see it work and work on a buck, a good buck, I mean, and to have it work all the way through to a shot, I mean, it was pretty spectacular for him to see.
Well, if it, excuse me, if it morphs the way it did for me, bringing my boys up into the industry, and I was pretty hardcore at the time, you come full circle. And now, like you say, you don't hate him that much or whatever it is that just, you're in a different place, the way you're hunting to get more challenge. But
yeah,
all of a sudden it just flips. And the most important thing at this time for me is to make sure that my kids are having a great experience.
Right.
And I would much rather see them succeed. Gives me just as much fulfillment, actually more than myself. But then again, if a 200-inch deer walks in front of me, and I shoot it, I'm sure there's going to be plenty of satisfaction there. But truly, to watch them grow and to watch them change and to experience that's huge. I just think back of the first time I took Chris and JJ out hunting, gun hunting, and then JJ's first bow hunt. We got back, and he was all excited and everything. I'm going, well, what happened? He goes, the deer came right in underneath me, and I seen it coming, and I got ready, and I said, well, did you get a shot at him? He goes, well, no, I couldn't get my bow pulled back. And I'm going, well, was it too hard? I mean, is there too much, pull on there? No, because my arm was hitting the tree. And I realized right then, I never told him that he's supposed to stand up. So he was sitting down the whole time.
Yeah,
and so his arm was locked in. He couldn't get the bow pulled back. And it's just those little things like that. And now he's teaching me,
Yeah.
And so it's awesome.
Yeah, that's cool because it's the same way with me and Carter. It's just he's always wanting to go, and he pushes me to go, and I've learned to relax a little bit. Hunting is serious for me. I take it really serious when I'm out there, but especially with kids, you need to scale it back a little bit, make it enjoyable, take snacks, laugh, have fun. Keep them interested. Like we go back to the woodsmanship, that's something that I'm trying to instill in him. Take him out, show him the sign, teach him to read it. I don't want to just stick him in a box blind and on a food source and say, oh, here he is, That's just not my style of hunting. So that's something I'm trying to teach him too.
Yeah, I think it's a process, I think it's important to really get him out there. And we talked about this earlier, when you first take him out there when it's nice out.
Yeah.
Take them out there where they don't have to walk 5 miles to get to a spot. Take them out there the first time where they might see some deer. Now it's different than saying go and sitting in a box blind in a big one walking out and say, okay, here he is, and that's it. It's about teaching them those little things. But when they first start out, man, just try to get them to have a good experience and they want to do it again.
Yeah, so like this year even, he harvested a great buck this year with me, youth season. Jacob got it on film for us, and so that experience, we were sitting in a box blind, not to go against my own words, but we were actually sitting on a box blind on this particular night, 3 of us, and we went through trail cam pictures before the hunt, and there was a particular buck that he was kind of after. He said, I want that one if he comes out. And I'm like, we'll see what happens. You never really shot a racked buck. Let's just see what gets you excited, And we were sitting there, and it was hot. September, sun shining on a blind, hot. And we were sitting there, and he'd forgot his bag of snacks about a quarter mile back down the road at the shop. So
It's like forgetting your deer call.
Right. So it actually worked out to our benefit. We actually just said, hey, if it's your hunt. If you want to have your snacks and you want to have your stuff, bail out the back of the blind and go get them and come back. So he did. He climbed out of the back of the blind, and here he came back about 15, 20 minutes later, hadn't missed a thing. Come back with a backpack full of water and snacks, brought stuff for me and Jacob in there, and brought Faye's field foam so we could get all cleaned up since we were sweating. He knew that already. So, it was a proud moment, and it was his deal. I was going to let him set the terms. If he wanted his snacks, if that's what's going to make the hunt, then go get them. So it has to be more about them than about what Dad wants most of the time.
Absolutely. Well, I have a 2-year-old little boy, and I can't wait for him to get a little older, but I can only imagine that's got to be the most rewarding thing is seeing them have fun out there and seeing how they grow as hunters. I mean, that's got to be what it's all about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you got me going on stories now. Now I'm thinking back about the boys, so I got to share one more. Here's one with Chris when we were out hunting, and I had a lease at the time, and there was this young buck that was coming through this little ravine, and it had been pretty consistent. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take Chris out there and have him sit with me. So we went out there, and it was gun season. I'm sitting there on the ground. I'm like, all right, Chris, now that deer's probably going to come from over here where he was bedding out, and he's going to cross over here because I know he's going to get the food. And he's going to get down in this ravine where that opening is. I says, that's when we're going to be able to get a shot at him. And so we sat there, just like you, And we're sitting there, nothing's going on, and we're staring at it, and I'm telling him, you just got to be still, don't let him see you. And all of a sudden, this deer appears, and he appeared right in that area where I told him he would. And all of a sudden, Chris sees him, and he, Dad, there it is, right there, look, right there. Just that loud, And the deer stops and looks up and takes off running, and I just was laughing, and just experiences like that are just phenomenal.
I had a similar experience. I took my daughter Lainey this year for her first hunt as well. I was just trying to harvest the doe during late muzzleloader season, and it was a beautiful afternoon. Like you said, short walk, and we held hands all the way in there and get to the field. I knew there would be deer in the field, but we were going to sneak to it, And sure enough, there was several does in the field, and I said, all right, I'm going to pick this one over here to the right. I'm going to shoot that one, And she did the same thing. She goes, well, Dad, but what if I scream? I'm like, no. There's no reason to scream because the deer are going to run away. She's like, but what if I do? I'm like, no, you know. So finally I got her to understand that she wasn't supposed to scream, and I was able to shoot the deer, and so she got to be a part of it. And so I think she's going to be a little huntress too when she gets older. She seems like she's going to have the bug too. So it's kind of inevitable, I think, in my house. So
Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, they're going to have some good role models, and it sounds like some pretty good ground to hunt too when they grow up, which is awesome. Well, before we wrap up here, if you had one piece of hunting advice to give somebody, what would it be?
Man, one piece. I think we already kind of talked about it, but it just always, I mean, my biggest piece of advice is just always be willing to learn, you know? Don't ever think that you know everything there is to know about killing big whitetails or, you know, shooting geese or whatever it might be. I mean, just always be willing to learn and respect the animals that you're after. I mean, I just think that overall is the best information I can give somebody is just pay attention and if the sign's there, read it and understand it and reference a lot of those old materials and stuff that people have long since forgot about, you know, and you can learn a lot of stuff from that for sure.
Absolutely. One last question before we go. It's prime shed hunting season right now. Mm-hmm. Where are you looking for sheds?
The best place I can find them this year seems to be out of the truck window. I've only found a few sheds so far this year, but I will say that I've got a deer that's going to be pretty special for next year that I'm trying to nail down, and I've already located his sheds. A few people have seen him. I'm not even really sharing a lot of pictures of him or whatever. I'm trying to keep him pretty well quiet, but there's a big deer in the area that I'm after, and I've got his sheds, so I know where he's at and what he's doing, I think.
Well, you've been here all day, and this is the first I've heard about it. So,
well, see, that's what I'm saying.
Good deal. Well, thanks for joining us, guys. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Definitely look forward to watching Colton on his hunt breakdowns this fall. They're going to be absolutely out of this world. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and go check out the free Deer Society app. We appreciate you listening. And Colton, thanks, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Enjoyed it.
Yep. Good to see you again.